in the history of the NFL, Russell Wilson trade has to go down maybe as bad as some of the others. Denver, Seattle, when they traded Wilson, the Broncos gave up 2 number ones, 2 number twos, and 3 players, including young quarterback Drew Lock.
Unbelievable.
Then they gave him, no, it's not. Now this is unbelievable. They gave him $242 million guaranteed, and now they've cut him, and they got an $85 million cap hit. His record in Denver was 11-19. He played for Nathaniel Hackett. That was a horrible hire as head coach. Played for Sean Payton. Payton benched him at the end of the season. So just think of what Denver gave up. 1-1, 2-2, a 3, and 3 players. Gave him $242 and then had to take an $85 million cap hit to get rid of him. How'd that trade work out?
Yeah, not good. I mean, that GM is still employed in Denver, right?
Yeah. Now, the Cleveland Browns, and again, these are modern-day trades. Modern day because of the salary cap. The rules are really different. Cleveland Browns, Deshaun Watson, and they got him from Houston. They gave up a 1, a 1, a 3, and a 4. That's a pretty significant price.
Yeah.
They gave him $232 million, all of it guaranteed.
That's right. All of it, every year.
Despite all the junk with the masseuses and all that he got himself sued for with the Houston Texans. They guaranteed him. The guy has played 12 of 34 games in 2 years.
Unbelievable.
Suspension first this past year, severe shoulder injury, a.k.a. surgery. So that was a hell of a price to give with a lot of guaranteed money. And I think we can judge right now, at least 2 years in, boy, that trade didn't work out for Cleveland. Okay, now let's go to the modern day era. And this might be the all-time worst trade. You do remember Herschel Walker, Dallas Cowboys, the arrival of Jimmy Johnson. Jerry Jones gave him the key to the player personnel room. Jimmy Johnson went in and cleaned it out. He traded Herschel Walker to Minnesota. Hold on to the table. Minnesota gave up 3 number ones, 2 number twos, 3 number threes, and 5 players.
Oh, my God.
It was a massive deal. It's like a 15-player, 16-player transaction. Jimmy Johnson got rid of the big contract of Herschel Walker. Jimmy Johnson flipped those draft picks into a wide variety of players to acquire. He wound up with Emmitt Smith, Russell Maryland, Darren Woodson, quarterback Steve Walsh, amongst the players that came from the picks they got from Minnesota. Herschel Walker staggered through 2 injury seasons, didn't amount to a hill of beans out of football. Historically, that might be the worst modern-day trade of all time. I mean, just think of that. 3 1s, 2 2s, 3 3s, and 5 players, all to Dallas for Herschel Walker, who was effectively done. Then, back in 1987, Rams, Colts, Buffalo, 3-way deal in the middle of the season, right before the trade deadline. Indianapolis winds up with Eric Dickerson, came from the Rams. Buffalo winds up flip-flopping picks with Cornelius Bennett, Hall of Fame type pass rusher, really fine player out of Alabama. And the Rams got a 1, a 1, a 1, a 2, a 2, a 2, and 2 running backs in the transaction. Plus they got obviously a lot of budget space. So Eric Dickerson going to the Colts in a 3-way deal really benefited the Rams. Now, way back in the day, Buffalo and your 49ers, O.J. Simpson. Do you remember O.J. Simpson was traded to San Francisco?
Oh, I remember.
The juice did not have much juice left when he got there. It cost them a 1, a 2, a 3, and a 4. San Francisco traded their top 4 picks to get O.J. Simpson.
Unbelievable.
And he got there, he'd come off surgery, never, ever the same player again. And do you remember Mike Ditko? Not just Bears coach. Mike Ditko is coach -- general manager, New Orleans Saints.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
How about this trade? Ditka traded all of his draft picks in one season, picks 1 through 6, plus a 1 and a 2 the next year to get Ricky Williams from Miami. He made that trade, and he got Ricky Williams to come to New Orleans. Ricky played there for 3 years, flamed out, became a marijuana entrepreneur, wound up going to the Dolphins, played a brief time there. End of story. Mike Ditka Might have been a great coach, not a very
Didn't
good
Ricky
general.
Williams show up like in a bridal gown at his press conference?
Oh, yeah.
It was something crazy.
Bizarro, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so those are modern day trades. The Herschel Walker trade, I think, has to be the all-time worst. And then back in the day, and I'll be reaching for some names that people who don't have gray hair wouldn't probably identify with. How about this trade? Chicago Cardinals, LA Rams. Remember the name Ollie Matson?
That's going way before my time.
That was a great running back of the
Uh-huh.
1950s, close to the 60s. The Rams dealt 9 players and 2 picks. Ollie Matson goes to the Chicago Cardinals. The Rams wound up with some really good linemen from that trade. Ken Panfill, Frank Fuller, Art Hauser. These are all really old names. Those of us who have gray hair will remember this, but that was like a 15-player trade. Then way back in the day, you do know the name Don Shula.
Yeah.
Don Shula was part of a 15-player trade from the Cleveland Browns to the Baltimore Colts.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, it was a really fascinating
As a
deal.
player or as a coach?
As a player.
Hmm.
Guys like Mike McCormick, Don Colo, great defensive linemen, offensive linemen, wound up going to the Cleveland Browns. Don Shula was the cornerback, was part of this team
Oh, interesting.
that went from Cleveland to the Baltimore Colts. Do you remember George Allen?
Oh, yeah, of course.
You know, the
Redskins, right?
Redskins.
Yeah.
You know, the Rams adopted his philosophy a couple of years ago, F them draft picks.
Yeah.
So the Redskins made a deal with the Rams. Marlon McKeever, really good defensive player. He goes from the Redskins to the Rams, and the Redskins get a whole bunch of linebackers. You'll probably remember some of these names. Maxie Baughan, Jack Pardee, Myron Patios. That was all part of the George Allen era. That was a big trade. And way back, even before my time, the biggest trade of all time was the then Dallas Texans and the Rams. The Dallas Texans were the first, quote, pro football team. Didn't last very long. They became the Baltimore Colts. The Dallas Texans and the Rams. Dallas got 11 players from the Rams for 1.
11-1?
The player was Les Richter, went to the Rams, great linebacker, stayed in the NFL like 13 years and then became a NASCAR executive. The Rams got Les Richter in this deal from Dallas, an 11-for-1 trade. So those are the history of just unbelievable deals. So as you sit there in angst about Denver and what they gave Seattle to get Russell Wilson, and you look at what the Browns gave to get Deshaun Watson, think about the Herschel Walker trade that Jimmy Johnson engineered, the Eric Dickerson trade, the O.J. Simpson trade, the Ricky Williams fiasco, and then Ollie Matson way back in the day. It's fascinating. It took me about 50 minutes to go through and research each of these deals and said, oh, yeah, I remember reading about that trade. It's phenomenal. I mean, when you get a 15-player trade, 11-for-1, I get you couldn't do it now in the salary cap era.
Of course not.
But so, John, go ahead, sort all this out.
Sort it out. I mean, first of all, it's incredible, some of these deals. That Herschel Walker deal totally set up Jimmy Johnson to have that run in the early 90s. But the one that I remember, I was a little kid, is when O.J. Simpson came to the 49ers. And it was an interesting time because the Niners, they had John Brody and Gene Washington and Vic Washington in the early 70s, and they would get to the playoffs. They always got knocked off by the Dallas Cowboys. And then I think Brody retired, and they took a dip down. And then the Niners traded first of all for Jim Plunkett.
Right.
And then they traded for OJ, and gave up a ton of picks, and they were terrible.
Well, Plunkett had been battered in New England.
Yeah.
He got there and couldn't throw the football, and OJ had come off surgery after the electric company seasons for the juice in Buffalo, and he had nothing left. Just disastrous.
He probably got hurt running through the airport, at Hertz rental car. But the other part of the story that's interesting is that my mother actually worked with OJ's sister at a trucking company in the city of San Francisco. They both worked in the accounting department, and they were really good friends. And OJ, is from San Francisco. He went to the City College of San Francisco before going to USC. So it was a nice homecoming, for San Francisco fans. But the trade was a disaster. The Niners had like a little bit of a run, like in the late 70s with that orange crush, the gold rush defense.
Yes.
They had all the defensive linemen. But it wasn't until Joe Montana came rolling into town that they got saved.
Yeah. Big trades. I mean, if you got spare time, you just Google NFL's biggest trades, you'll be floored. So I tried to give you a thumbnail sketch of the biggest transactions. And of course, that was a different era before the salary cap and the mega contracts and all that. Back then you were trading player for player. Now you're trading dollars and contracts and out clauses and guarantees.
Well, it's like the way the NBA makes trades. They're just moving money around.
Exactly. Hey, we get